Welcome to today's session on basic cooking and making a meal. This is the one of the first videos in the cooking and meal prep group, and I recommend watching this one before you watch the other videos on making certain recipes. So today we're going to review kitchen safety. Whoops, there. These are the other topics that are going to be in the videos as well. So we have one on reading a recipe. So viewing this one on kitchen safety and reading a recipe should be viewed first. Then you can go through and view and practice making different foods using the recipe videos, making a sandwich, eggs and toast, baked chicken, broccoli and potatoes, pasta, meat sauce, and frozen vegetables. They are in order of difficulty, so making a sandwich will be a good one to start with if you're really just getting familiar and comfortable with the kitchen. And pasta, meat sauce, and frozen vegetables is the one that requires the most skills and is the most complex. So that one is good if you've done some practice or you're more familiar in the kitchen. So you can kind of work your way through that one. So for today, we're going to go through kitchen safety. And there's a few things to remember, and this content or information might be familiar. We did review some kitchen safety in the safety videos, so if you've used those already, these will look a little familiar to you. But safety is always good to review and to make sure that we really know and understand it. So this video is just focused on safety in the kitchen, and there's some new things here that will be learned too. So we're going to start with just reviewing some tips here. The first thing is that you never want to leave food cooking without watching it. If you need to step away, maybe you need to go to the bathroom or you're grabbing your phone from another room, make sure that you set a kitchen timer or a phone alarm to remind you. So there's little kitchen timers like this. They're magnetic. They can stick on your fridge so that they're always easy to find. Can be really, really helpful, even if you just set it for 5 minutes to help you remember to come back to the kitchen. You also want to make sure that any tools that you use are safe to heat. So there's a few general rules. First, dishes and bowls should say that they are microwave safe on the bottom. If not, they may melt in the microwave if they're heated, especially for too long. Plastic never goes inside the oven. Do not leave utensils or dishes sitting over a stove or burner. So as you can see here, we left this, set this ladle down to the side. Probably we're using it in the pot that's on the stove there, but in forgetting about it, turning on the burner, when we touch that handle, it's going to be very hot and could burn us and cause a serious injury. We definitely don't want to do that. Do not leave utensils sitting inside pots cooking on the stove. Plastic might melt and metal may become too hot to handle. So as you can see there, it's leaning on the side. Now I'm not worried about this melting or catching on fire because the handle is metal, but if it's leaning on that burner, on the pot that's on the burner and it's getting hot, when I go to touch it again, it could be hot and burn my hand. When you're checking the temperature over heated areas on the stove, never touch the items directly. Just hold your hand over the pot, kind of hovering it. You'll be able to feel the heat just from that. You don't need to touch the burner or the pot itself to make sure that it's hot. So that should be enough to be able to tell you whether or not your pot is getting warm. So now we're going to review specifically some safety tips using the microwave. First, you want to only use microwave safe dishes. Those symbols that are pictured to the right there, you will see on the bottom of dishes and bowls if they're safe to put in the microwave. So it might say microwave safe. It also might just have that symbol with the squiggly lines there. So look at the bottom for that symbol. If it doesn't have it on there and it's plastic, it's probably best to try to find something else and not use that. Never put metal in the microwave. It will cause a fire, sparks, all kinds of stuff, and it's definitely kind of scary when it happens, so never put anything metal in the microwave. When you're using frozen meals, make sure that you read the package instructions to make sure that the packaging itself can be put in the microwave. So for this example, over on the right there, it says make a 1-inch slit and overlap, cook on high for 4 to 5 minutes, remove overwrap. So that tells you that the thing itself, the plastic that's on top of the microwave meal, can stay on while it's cooking, although you want to make a slit. And you want to make sure that you follow the directions on packages for heating time and temperature. So this particular example says for 4 to 5 minutes. And so that's what we would want to follow. You can always test the food. And if it needs to go in the microwave for longer, you can add more time. But if you've gone too far too long, your food might overcook, it might burn, it might damage it. And so it's better to err on the side of going shorter and adding time if you need it. And make sure that you use a pot holder or a dish towel to remove items from the microwave. So they'll get hot in there, and even if the containers are microwave safe, they're still going to be really warm. And so especially the parts where the food is sitting on, you don't want to get too hot or burn yourself or be so hot that you might drop it. Use a pot holder or a dish towel, something to just kind of give you protection on your hand. So now we're going to watch a short video about using the microwave.
Hey everybody, I'm here today to show you how to use an over-the-range microwave. In this video, I will be demonstrating some of the most basic functions and also some of the more advanced functions of this over-the-range microwave. Now, although I will be demonstrating how to use this specific over-the-range microwave, you can probably take this information and use it on your own over-the-range microwave, even if it is not this exact model. That is simply because the majority of over-the-range microwaves operate in very similar ways and have very similar functions. All right, with that being said, let's get right to the tutorial. If you take a look right here, this is the handle on the door of the microwave. You can simply pull it to open this up and then push it to close it. That is how you load food into the microwave and also remove food from the microwave, okay? Now let's say that I wanted to heat up food that was in the microwave. I can use the timer. That is one of the most basic functions of an over-the-range microwave, okay? So to start the timer, you simply have to put the numbers. So let's say I wanted to put the timer on for 2 minutes. I would push 200. As you can see, it says 2 minutes. And to start the microwave, I would push Enter Start right here. Now the microwave has turned on. It is heating up the imaginary food, and the timer is counting down. Now when the timer has finished counting down, the microwave will turn off. It will stop heating up the food, and the microwave will beep to allow you to know that the food is ready, okay? Now if you want to stop the timer before it has finished, you can push the Stop Clear button right here. Just like that. As you can see, the timer has been paused and the over-the-range microwave has stopped heating up the imaginary food. If I wanted to start it again and continue the timer, I would push the Start button right here. Okay? Now, let's say that I wanted to pause the timer and then clear the timer. Let's say that I wanted to stop heating up the food completely right about now. I would stop it, and that puts it on pause, and then I can push that button again, the Stop Clear button, just to clear the timer. Just like that. As you can see, the timer has been cleared. So that is the most basic functionality of an over-the-range microwave. This microwave right here has this plus 30 seconds button, so you can just push it to quickly add 30 seconds to the timer. Just like that. You can continually add 30 seconds to the timer, just like that. And I'm just going to clear the timer right now, just like that. So that is basically the most basic functionality of the microwave. Now, into some of the more advanced functions. Right here, there are some cooking presets. And this is available on, I would say, a good portion of over-the-range microwaves. Now, there are preset cooking presets, obviously, that you can choose from. So kids meals, if I wanted to choose a specific kids meal, I could refer to the manual and I could choose the kids meal that each of these numbers is referring to. I could select it just like that. Let's say I wanted the fourth one, and then I could push the Start button and it would go for a preset amount of time at a preset heat, at a preset heating level, okay? I'm just going to clear that. There's also sensor cooking options up here. So if you take a look, it says popcorn, potato, pizza, cook, reheat, and veggies. So I can choose between all of these options, and it will use a sensor to figure out when the microwave should stop heating up the food, depending on which one I have selected and depending on the presets that are in the microwave's computer. So that is basically everything that involves the actual microwave. Now, an over-the-range microwave has some added functionality. Okay,
so we're going to pause there for for this video, just as it reviewed sort of the basic microwave functions. And as the gentleman said who recorded this video, you know, most microwaves are going to be relatively similar to this. And so you can kind of generalize these different components of it and setting the time, hitting start, clearing it. And I would just recommend doing, if you're unfamiliar with using a microwave, I would just recommend doing a little bit of practice with it so that you get familiar with it, starting with something simple like heating up a meal in the microwave, like a frozen meal, can help you get comfortable with the functions and features of it.
Hey.
So now we're going to go through stovetop safety. So you want to make sure that you're using only stovetop safe pots and pans. Unlike microwave pans, there's not really any sort of symbol that tells you specifically, but you're going to have your basic metal pan is what's going to be safe for you to use. When you're cooking food on the stovetop, make sure that you read the package directions for temperature instructions and timing. So anything you might cook on the stove, even if it's instant mashed potatoes, oatmeal, pasta, a can of soup or a container of soup, it's all going to tell you on the side of the package what temperature to heat it up at and for how long. So it's important to read that before you start cooking. Most food that you cook on the stovetop requires some type of oil spray or water to cook safely and not burn the food. So whenever you're putting food into a pot or a pan on the stovetop, you either need to spray the pan with an oil, with a PAM spray, add some oil to it or some water. What you'll do to make sure that you're safe when you're cooking food and adding oil to a pan is that you're going to put the oil in first and then turn the burner on. So what might happen is if you put the pan on the stove and you get the pan hot and then add the oil might splatter or spit because the pan is hot. So it's better to put the oil in the pan before you turn on the burner to heat it up. Then if it's a food that you're, heating up the oil a little bit, then adding the food, just be careful when you add the food to prevent the pan from splattering. Try to get it as close as possible. If it's a larger food item, like, like a piece of chicken or something, try to use tongs or a fork to put it in the pan so that you're not dropping it from a far distance and causing that hot oil to splatter at you. When you're cooking in the stove, make sure that you stir items in the pot every few minutes because you don't want it to stick or to burn to the bottom of the pot. Any leftover oil that you have in the pan after cooking shouldn't go down in the drain or sink, especially when it's hot. You want to let it cool, and then if you can, put it in a container to throw away. If it's just a small amount, it's okay to wash out, but if you were doing something like frying and you had a lot of oil in there, you'd want to dump it after it's cooled into a container to throw away. It's not very good for your sink to pour oil down it. And then if you're using water to cook your food, so again, I think of pasta or oatmeal or rice, you're going to boil in water, make sure there's enough to cover all of the food in the pot. Again, if you don't add quite enough water, it's going to cause the food to stick to the bottom and potentially burn. But these skills we're going to review in the actual cooking videos and recipes. You'll see demonstration of some of these different skills here. If you are boiling water and the pot overflows, turn off the burner and just move the pot to a clean burner to finish cooking. What you might notice is that there might be a little bit of steam or smoke from the water on the hot burner, and that's okay. That's normal. If there's no flames, it's not thick smoke, if it's not getting heavier and heavier, it's fine. It just is going to cook out a little bit, but you don't want to keep cooking on that burner if you don't have to. And then if you are boiling a pot of anything, water, food gets stuck on the burners, turn your burner off, and then when it's cool, you can clean it from the stovetop, but don't try to clean it before it gets cool. Okay, so now we're going to watch another short video on just some tips for using the stove.
Hey everybody, I'm here today to show you how to use an electric stove. So as you can see right here, I have an electric stove in front of me, and this will be a video tutorial showing you how to use one. So let's get right to it. As you can see right here, there are 4 elements on this electric stove. Now the majority of electric stoves have 4 elements, but some of them have 5 or even 6 elements. The process will be very, very similar for all of these electric stoves. So basically, as you can see right here, there are 4 knobs. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 2 knobs on the left control the 2 elements on the left, right there. And if you look on top of the knobs, you can see that one of the circles has been colored in to be a darker color. So basically these 4 circles represent the 4 elements on the stove. And this one, this knob right here, controls the bottom left element, the bottom left burner. This knob right here controls the top left burner, because you can see that the bottom left circle is darkened in this one, and the top left circle has been darkened in this one. So basically, if I want to turn on one of the electric stove elements, all that I have to do is figure out which knob controls that specific element. So if I wanted to turn on this one, which is the top left element, I would look for the top left knob, which is this one, the top left knob. And all that I have to do to turn it on is push the knob in and turn it. So I'm just going to push it in, and I'm going to turn it to, we'll say 4, which is sort of like a medium heat. I'm going to push it in and turn it to 4. And this stovetop element will start to heat up. And I can already feel that it is heating up, and you can see that it is turning red, which means that it is on and it is heating up. Now, if you take a look right here, there are 2 lights that have been illuminated. One says burner on, and the other one says hot cooktop. So basically, now that one of the burners or one of the elements has been turned on, this light will illuminate. And because one of the burners is hot, this light is illuminated. Now, if I were to turn off the burner, so to turn it off, all that you have to do is turn it back to the center right here, where this area right here means off. So I'm just going to turn it to the center, and you will be able to see that it turns off just like that. And as you saw right there, immediately when I turned the burner off, this light turned off, because there are no longer any burners that are on. However, this light will stay illuminated until the cooktop is no longer hot. So now that the cooktop is still hot, this light stays on just to warn you that the cooktop is hot. And basically the process is the same if I were to want to turn on a burner on the right hand side. Let's say that I wanted to turn on the bottom right burner. I would locate the bottom right knob, which is this one right here, bottom right, and I would turn it on. And in this case, I'm going to turn it to the level 9, which is really hot. So I'm just going to push it in and turn it to the 9. And basically, now once again, you can see that the burner on light has illuminated. And as you can see, the burner or element has been turned on. And to turn it off, I just have to turn it to the middle again, just like that. And then as you can see, the burner on light has now turned off. And that's basically it. That is how to use an electric stove. It is a simple process, and in this video tutorial, I have shown you how to use one in a step-by-step.
Okay, so that was another good, I really liked that overview because there was a couple of good things to pay attention to in that, right? One is the light, that the burner is still hot. Every stove will have that. It might say burners hot or cooktop hot. And that's just really good because even though you've turned it off, it takes a moment, especially for an electric stove, to cool down a little bit. And so that can be really helpful to remember that space is going to be hot. So you don't want to set anything on it. You don't want to rest your hand on it until that light goes off. So now we're going to talk through oven safety. So in the oven, you want to only use oven-safe dishes, never plastic. Some stovetop pans cannot go in the oven. So you might see sometimes people, if it's an all metal pan, will put it into the oven to cook. If your pots and pans have any sort of rubber on the handles or soft grip or any other non-heatable materials, they definitely cannot go into the oven. So definitely double check and make sure what of your items can go into the oven and what need to stay on the stovetop. Just like cooking on the stove, you want to make sure that you've greased your pan or used foil or parchment paper to prevent food from sticking and burning to your pans. And again, that I'll show you in one of the videos, Pam spray is a really nice thing. Just gives a light coating over the bottom of the pan to prevent your food from sticking. I also like using parchment paper and aluminum foil because it makes it very easy to clean the pans when we're done. You just, once it's cool, you take the foil or the paper off the pan and throw it away, and you just need to wipe down your pan briefly. There's not anything really stuck to it, so it can be a nice trick. You also, when you're using the oven, you want to turn the oven to the temperature indicated in the directions, and you'll need to allow time for the oven to heat up. So you might decide, okay, I'm going to cook some fries in the oven, right, that are in my freezer. So looking at the instructions, you want to look to make sure that you set the oven to the right temperature, but then you're going to have to wait for the oven to warm up before you put them in. Otherwise, they're not going to be fully cooked, and your oven will notify you, just sort of like a washer or dryer. There will be a beep or kind of usually, I guess, a beep to let you know that the oven is warm. And when you're getting food out of the oven, always, always, always use a pot holder to put food in and take food out of the oven. It's definitely makes a big difference. You'll burn your hand otherwise. I recommend pot holders that cover your whole hand because you don't want to, or a glove, because you don't want to bump your hand on the top of it, especially if it's something heavy. So make sure you have a really good set of pot holders. If you buy a good set, they will last you for a very, very long time. Also, when you're cooking in the oven, set a timer, alarm, or note the time on your clock to take the food out. So food that cooks in the oven generally takes longer, much longer than the microwave, and you can't necessarily see it or hear it like you would on the stovetop, like if you're boiling water. So sometimes it can get easy to get distracted, or if you get tired, you don't want to stand in the kitchen. You know, if something's cooking for 30 minutes, you might decide to go to another room. If you do that, absolutely set a timer or an alarm so that you remember to go back. It's very easy to forget about it and have something burn. So yeah, so setting a timer and also turning on the oven light might remind you that food is cooking in there too. So when you're getting food out of the oven, just like we said, take pot holders to take the food out. When you take the hot pan out of the oven, you want to make sure that you're putting it on a surface that's safe to put it on. So a plastic surface is not safe. Certain countertops are not good to put a hot pan of food directly on straight out of the oven. A quick, easy tip is really just to put it on the stovetop. The stovetop can handle something that's really hot that's been cooking in the oven. You can set it on there, and that can be where it cools off. You may also choose to buy an oven rack or a cooling rack, not an oven rack, a cooling rack or a trivet or something that will is metal, and you can safely put the pan of food on it, but it's not directly touching the countertop. And then you always want to make sure to turn off the oven. So we're going to watch another video from the same gentleman on using the oven.
Hey everybody, I'm here today to show you how to turn on an electric oven. So as you can see right here, I have my electric oven in front of me, and I'm going to show you how to turn it on. So you're going to walk up to the electric oven and you're going to look at the control unit, and you're going to look for two options. One option is bake and the other option is broil. Now my two options are located right here on this oven, but yours might be somewhere else on the control unit. So you are going to select the one that you want. So in my case, I need the bake option. So I'm going to touch the bake button, and you will see that these lines come up to select the temperature. Now I'm going to hit the, oh sorry, the lines went away. When the lines come up, you are going to hit the up or down button. So I'm going to hit bake again, and then I'm going to hit the up button until I hit the temperature that I need, which is 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So now you can see it's at 450. I'm not going to touch anything, and the oven should start preheating. And as you can see right now, the preheat light turned on and the oven light turned on. So that means that the oven is on and it is currently preheating. Now, once the oven reaches the desired temperature, which in my case is 450 degrees Fahrenheit, it will beep. and that beeping sound will let you know that it has reached the desired temperature, and the preheat light will go off because it will no longer be preheating. It will be at the desired temperature. And that's basically it. It is a simple process. And in this video, I have shown you how to turn on an electric oven. I have
Okay. So again, that just showed a couple of really good quick tips, especially about the preheat part. So most ovens will have a preheat light, and that means the stove is getting hot, but it is not at the temperature yet. So when that light goes off, that's when you know you can put your food into the oven to cook. So now we're going to review kitchen fire safety. And again, this information might be repetitive from our previous safety videos, but again, I think anything safety-wise, it's always good to review. So if you're cooking on the stove top and there's a small fire, one option is that you can cover it with flour or use a fire extinguisher if you have one in your kitchen. And the one you should have in your kitchen is a certain type of fire extinguisher, different than you might have in the rest of your house. But you can have a fire company come and show you how to use it, not a fire company, a fire department come and show you how to use it. You never want to use water to put out a fire in the kitchen or a grease fire. That will actually cause it to get worse. So never ever use water. If the fire is big, is getting out of control, you're very anxious about it, call 911 as soon as possible. And we're going to watch a short video about it.
How to put out a grease fire. A grease fire can escalate quickly. Follow these safety steps to douse the flames. You will need a non-glass pan lid, baking soda, and a kitchen fire extinguisher. Grease fires can be very dangerous. Call 911 as soon as you suspect you cannot control the fire. Step 1. Turn off the burner and get everybody out of the kitchen. Have your phone at the ready in case you need to call 911. Step 2. Steer clear of water. Pouring water on burning grease will cause the superheated water to splatter, spreading the fire. Do not carry the burning pan outside. The grease will splash and spread the fire. Step 3. Cover the fire with the pan lid. Avoid using glass lids since they can shatter from the heat. Step 4. Smother the fire with baking soda. This method works if a large amount of baking soda is quickly accessible. Stop, drop, and roll if your clothes catch on fire. Step 5. Douse the fire with a dry chemical fire extinguisher. Store a Class B kitchen fire extinguisher within easy reach. Step 6. If the flames aren't out, call 911 immediately and get out of the house. Did you know?
Okay, so that was just a quick review of the different things that you can do if that happens. They noted baking soda in the video, which also works, but a large amount of flour would work well also, and oftentimes people are more likely to have a large amount of flour than they are baking soda. But in any case, if there's any sort of danger, you're not sure you're going to be able to put it out, call 911 and get out of the house. So I'm just going to review a couple of two scenarios here, and you're going to stop and think about what you might do. So you're cooking grilled cheese on the stove when you get a phone call. You get distracted by the phone call and forget to flip over your grilled cheese. When you realize it, the pan is smoking and it has set off your smoke detector. You don't see any flames. What would you do? So take a moment here thinking about the tips that we just talked about, and what would you do in this particular situation? So a few options. First, you would make sure that you would turn off the stove. Move the pan from the burner to one that is not on, right? So you don't want it to keep cooking and keep getting hot. And if there are no flames and still no flames, reset the smoke detector, get it to turn off, but there's not anything else you need to do. You just let the pan cool down. And if your grilled cheese is really burnt, wait till everything is cooled to clean it off and throw it away. Next scenario. You're cooking chicken in the oven. You start to smell smoke and it seems like something is burning. Your smoke detector is also alarming. You go to the oven and see that some of the oil from your pan has dripped to the bottom of the oven and that it is filled with smoke. You also see that there are flames inside of the oven. What would you do? So take a moment here and think about the different tips suggested and what would you do in this situation? First, you would turn off the oven, right? You don't want it to continue to get warmer. You can, if you have a bag of flour, get a bag of flour or your kitchen fire extinguisher to put over the flames. If you don't have either of those or they don't work, close the oven door, call 911, and make sure that you get out of the house. All right, and there's a lot more tips on fire safety in the safety videos that are available. And so if you want to review more of that, I would definitely recommend reviewing those videos as well. So now we're going to talk about food storage. Do not let foods that need to be refrigerated sit out for more than 2 to 3 hours. So this might be things like milk, cheese, certain fruits or vegetables, anything that's an open container of juice. Most things that need to be refrigerated once they're opened should go in there not more than 2 to 3 hours after they're used. Do not let raw meat sit out at room temperature for more than 2 hours. Prepared cooked food can sit out for 2 to 3 hours before you need to put it away in the refrigerator or eating it. So the general rule is about 2 hours, and if food has been sitting out longer than that, whether or not it's something that needs to be refrigerated, it's raw meat, or you've already cooked it, at 2 hours you need to either put it away, prepare it, or it needs to be you need to get rid of it. You want to store food in tightly sealed containers. So there are some containers pictured at the right here. These are a nice set of containers. They all fit together, but there's a lot of different kinds of sealable containers that can be used really, that are really handy for storing extra food. So you can purchase plastic containers even from the dollar store, so you don't have to spend a lot of money on them. You can also use Ziploc bags, and if you're on a tight budget, you don't have to throw away a Ziploc bag after you use it. You can rinse it and reuse it basically until it doesn't seal anymore, as long as it doesn't have raw meat on the inside. Everything else you can rinse out and reuse. When you store food, it's also helpful for your budget because foods last longer if you store it in tightly sealed containers. It will also prevent bugs and other pests from getting into your food, especially if you're living in a city or an older house. There might be mice around. Bugs happen, especially in the summertime. You know, a lot of people struggle with managing ants, and they're all just looking for food. So if your food is sealed tightly in a container that they can't get to, that's going to prevent them from eating your food and ruining it. Containers for takeout and delivery can also be rewashed and reused to store food as well. That's a really good way to repurpose them, and they actually are generally really nice containers that are pretty leak proof. I like having those around. Always check your food and expiration dates before eating. So make sure if it's food that you've cooked and you've stored in your fridge maybe for a week, check and make sure that there's no mold growing on it, that everything is still good. You don't want to eat food with mold, that can make you sick. And check your expiration dates on your food as well. You know, there's certain foods that if it's 1 or 2 days past the expiration date, it might be okay. But you definitely want to test things like milk or other dairy products. Raw meat you don't want to eat after expiration. So it's helpful to not, this is why it's helpful not to buy too much if you're grocery planning, or to put things in the freezer. So handling raw meat, and spending a little bit of time on this because this is, if you handle raw meat incorrectly, it's a way that you can get sick or spread bacteria in your kitchen. So it's important to take care of it in the right way. So any raw or uncooked meat should be sealed securely and stored in the refrigerator and freezer until you are ready to use it. So sometimes people will buy a large pack of chicken because it's cheaper or it's on sale, and break up that package and have some in the refrigerator and put some in the freezer for later, which is a great idea. You just want to make sure that it's stored properly. So this is a time that Ziploc bags or freezer bags come in handy, because you can put the meat in those, seal them tightly, and place them in the freezer till you're ready to use it. If you're keeping meat in the freezer and defrosting it, you can move the meat from the freezer to the refrigerator the night before you're going to cook it. You can also put the meat, if it's still in its package, sealed tightly, in a bowl of warm water, and that will help defrost it. If it's not sealed tightly, the water might get in there, and you don't want that in your meat, so just make sure that it's sealed really tightly before you do that. And you can also leave it on the counter to defrost. I think a lot of folks do this. If you take it out and leave it out for a couple of hours so that you can cook it by dinner time. You don't want to leave it out more than 2 hours, and you want to make sure that it's on a bowl or a plate so that anything that sort of defrosts off of it doesn't get onto your countertop. And I would recommend the same if you're going to put it in your refrigerator as well. Other tips for handling raw meat. So when you're preparing it and getting ready to cook it, you need to cut it on a separate cutting board than the rest of your foods. You can also cut it last. So maybe you've prepped all your vegetables first, and then you can use the cutting board. But you never want to use a cutting board after you've put raw meat on it. You also want to wash your knife as soon as possible after cutting the meat. Wash your hands after handling raw meat and definitely before handling other foods. Immediately wipe up any drips and spills. And I think it's just good practice. Put your cutting board in the sink as soon as you're done using it so that if it does drip or anything spills off of it, it's in your sink, it's easy to clean, and it's not on your countertop where it could get with your other food. Once you're cooking raw meat, you want to make sure that your meat is cooked fully through before you eat it. And when you're cooking it, you can test it by pulling a piece out and cutting it in half when you're at the end of your cook time. So, just double checking that it's cooked all the way through. This is especially important for things like turkey, chicken, other poultry. Red meats, sometimes people don't cook it all the way through. They leave a little pink in the middle, which is fine. But you definitely want to cut it open still and make sure that it's cooked as much as you would like it cooked. So the last bit of safety tips I'm going to review is using a knife. And this is really important because a knife is a really helpful tool for having in your kitchen for preparing foods, but you want to make sure that you're using it properly to keep yourself and your fingers safe. So use a knife that's sharp. Sometimes people think that a duller knife is safer because they might not cut themselves as easily, but it's actually less safe to use a dull knife. A sharp knife will cut through foods easily. The foods won't roll around under the knife. It actually makes it much, much easier and safer. And use a knife that's the right size for what you're cutting. So the knife that's pictured here is a chef's knife, which is a 5-inch blade. This is a safe knife to use for pretty much almost anything, except for maybe some teeny tiny little foods. But overall, if you're going to have one knife, this is a good one to have. A paring knife might be another knife. It's a little bit smaller that is easier to handle. But you don't want a knife that's too big for small things because it's hard to control. When you're holding the knife, you want to keep the blade down at all times. You never want to point it towards yourself. You never want to point it towards anybody else. And you're going to hold the handle sort of like you're shaking somebody's hand. When you using a knife, you want to make sure to use a cutting board. Again, this will prevent the foods from slipping and your knife from slipping while you're using it and chopping up foods. It also just makes it easier for meal prep that you're not cooking straight onto the countertop. When you're chopping, and we're going to show a video in the next minute here, but when you're chopping, hold the food that you're chopping with your other hand. So keep it stable. Keep your fingers curled, just like it shows in the picture here. That's a pretty extreme, I guess, version of it. Not everyone cooks it quite that way, but you really want to make sure your fingertips are away from the knife. Try to cut the fruit or vegetable to make a flat surface. As you can see here again, the onion, they've cut it so that they have a flat side down and there's not a round side kind of rolling around underneath where they're working, and laying that flat surface on the cutting board. When you're done using the knife, put it in a safe spot and away from the edge of the counter. You don't want to accidentally bump it and have it fall on the ground. It's definitely not safe. And then as soon as you're done cooking with it or using it, wash and dry the knife as soon as you're done. You don't want to leave a knife laying in the sink or by the sink, especially if you live with other people, because they might not know it's there, or if the sink is that area is wet, it could slip out of your hand. So it's best just to take care of it right away. So now we're going to watch a short video on safely using a knife.
All right, so I'm going to show you just a couple of quick tips for safety in using your knife in the kitchen. I'm going to show you two different types of knives. You may have a set of knives that you've gotten. You may only have one of these knives, and that's fine. So this first knife here, this big one, this is called a chef's knife. If you're going to get one knife, this is a good size to buy because you can cut pretty much anything with it. The second knife you might buy is a smaller one. This is a paring knife. Sometimes this is nice because you'll feel like you have a little more control with it. So if you're really nervous about starting with knives, you can start with this little guy here. So I'm gonna start with this chef's knife. I'm gonna show you some tips for chopping up an onion. So the first thing that we're gonna do with this onion is actually cut it in half. So as you can see, it's round, right? It's gonna probably roll around on our cutting board a little bit. So it's easiest if we start cutting it in half, giving ourselves a flat surface to work with. When I'm holding this onion, I'm gonna hold it really firmly to keep it from rolling around. I'm right-handed, so I'm gonna be cutting with my right hand. My left hand is gonna be holding onto this onion really firmly on the board so that it's not moving around too much while I'm cutting through it. When you're cutting, you don't wanna sort of lift up your knife and put it back down. Once it's in the food, you wanna sort of rock your knife towards or away from the cutting board, but you don't wanna be slicing up and down like that. So holding it firm and steady, cutting through, right? And so now I'm gonna point my tip down towards the cutting board, now the back of the knife towards it. I never lifted it up. So now I have this nice flat surface of onion to work with. And I'm gonna peel off the top layer of the onion. I also think it's easier to peel an onion once you slice into it a little bit because it gives you an edge to sort of pull from. And you don't want to eat that top flaky layer of onion, and sometimes the next layer will come with it, which is fine. It makes it a little easier to cut. So now I've got this little half of an onion here, and on an onion, might be hard to see in the video here, but there's little lines that go up and down. I'm going to cut along those lines, and that's just going to make it easier and faster to cut this onion. And as you can see, now I have a flat surface. There's nothing rolling around on the cutting board here. So this knife is going to go in the lines. I'm going to just follow along the lines of the onion. My left hand is stabilizing it here, and I'm going to slice. And this is if I was going to dice something. So if you see in a recipe the word dice or chop the onion, this is what it's looking for. So I push it in, slice it all the way down, lift it out to move over and slice again next. Now I've got these little thin strips here. I'm going to turn them this way. So I'm always cutting like this. I don't want to turn my hand and cut this way. I'm not going to have as much control. I'm going to move the food to make it easier for me to cut. Again, I'm going to hold this little pile with my fingers here, a little bit away from the knife, and just slice it down. Chop it just like that. Now, this last thing that I did here, right? So you notice getting down to the edge here, there's not really anything to hold on to cut these pieces, and I don't want my fingers that close to the knife. So instead, I'm going to use my hand on top of the knife to help control it and keep it close to the cutting board to cut these pieces smaller. So the tip of the knife goes down to the cutting board here, my hand goes on top, and it kind of makes it work like a lever. So the tip is always on the cutting board, and I'm lifting up, and I'm just moving the knife around the food, and this is getting some smaller pieces here. You can slide those pieces again, and you can do this across the cutting board. And having the hand on top just really keeps it safe, keeps things from slipping around on you, and a little bit more control to get these nice small pieces here. Okay. So now I'm going to show you just some safety in using this little knife, this paring knife, to cut up a sweet potato. Just like our onion here, the sweet potato is round. So I'm going to try to cut it down so I have a flat edge to it. I'm going to cut off this tip here and this tip here. And just like the onion, I want to dice it up. And so before I do that, I'm actually going to peel it. And a peeler is another really good tool to have in your kitchen. It can do a lot of different things. It gives you more control to get skin off than if you were just using a knife, but it is sharp, so you still need to know how to use it carefully. So with the peeler, now that I have this flat edge of the sweet potato, I can hold it down onto the cutting board, being careful of my fingers, staying out of the way of the peeler. I can start at the top, and I can just peel it all the way down, and then I'm going to turn that sweet potato so that I'm always peeling away from myself, not towards myself. I'm peeling down towards the cutting board, so if it slips, if something were to happen and were to slip down, it's just going to slip down onto the cutting board and not onto my finger. And do this all the way around. And now just to get this little, there's a spot there, this bottom part here, I'm going to hold it again with my fingers, just a short way to go, but again, you notice I'm still peeling away from my hand and towards the cutting board. That cutting board is kind of your safe spot for landing the knife, the peeler, whatever that might be. So now my potato is nice and peeled, and I'm going to use this knife and I'm going to cut it in half again. Right, and now I have these nice flat edges, so it's not rolling around under my fingers. And now that with the flat edge, I'm going to use this knife, and just like with the big knife, right, I'm going to try to do it in one motion and not lift it up back and forth. Now I have flat edges, and it's going to make it easier to cut these into squares. I'm just going to cut all the way down, and I've turned it right so that my hand is still moving in this motion. But now I'm getting these nice little sweet potato squares. I'm always using this hand to help stabilize, but keeping my fingers out of the way. I'm going to show you real quick with the chef's knife in case you have this larger knife at home, only this one. Same way, right? Stabilizing it with your fingers, one slice down, and then slicing. And again, you're not sawing at it, you're just applying pressure to push the knife down from top to bottom towards the cutting board. And that trick that I showed you with the onion, right? I like to use it with this big knife on this one too. Once you're cutting into it in these smaller pieces, I'm not going to hold them with my fingers. I'm going to put my hand on top, and that's going to help the knife stay straight as we're cutting. So that's some of your safe tips for the knife. As you notice too, when I set it down, I always set the blade away from me so that my hand doesn't ever land on it. And you don't want to leave a knife sitting around. So once you're done cooking, it's best just to wash them right away, dry them off, and put them where they go. You don't want to leave it in the sink where you might forget about it, or even at the bottom of the dish drain, especially if you live with other people who might not know that those are there. It's better just to wash and dry them and get them tucked away safe when you're finished using them. All right,
So that's it for the kitchen safety video today. I hope you learned a lot of really good tips to help you feel comfortable in working in the kitchen. The next videos in this series are reading a recipe, like we mentioned at the beginning. And then there's 4 videos that demonstrate different recipes and have you go through the steps of the recipe. So I would recommend going through those as well. And that will give you an opportunity to practice some of these skills here. So thank you for watching.